So hi guys, this is next talk in English. And topic is what happens before Nette application starts. So I'm Jan Kucharz. I'm keen in domain-driven design. Who knows what that is? Cool. Okay. I'm exploring event sourcing, and I'm an experienced community member, so I'm just not the backend guy. And I'm PHP stun backer. Who uses PHP stun? Great. Great. Who do not use PHP stun? Why?
No time. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm at Postsobota for quite long time. This is in Brno. 2009. I would appreciate feedback on this talk. So if you have any paper or notes, just write down what worked and what didn't work for you. Huh?
It's awesome already.
Okay. So, does not work again. Okay, so why does Bootstrap exist? Any ideas?
Why not?
Okay, so let's look at this graph when application starts. So there is HTTP request, which is triggered by web server. Then PHP starts. It includes Bootstrap. It setups environment. Then it returns container. Then service called application is received from that container that the application executes, and then it returns HTTP response. It's handled by the web server and returned to the user. So Bootstrap set up a global environment for running Nette application. That's the point, right? This is how Bootstrap looks in Nette sandbox. It's like basic application. When you want to start a web project, you can just clone this. And it looks like this. So let's go through this. Guys, who know what this is?
This is white page.
White page. So let's zoom out a little bit. It usually looks like this. You start writing something and you get this. This is white screen of death. And you don't want this, right? You want something like this. So that's what Bootstrap does. It setups Tracy, so it can handle errors for you. So it manages global error handling of PHP runtime. Behind the scenes, it does this calls. So it sets up strict mode and then calls Tracy debugger enable if some parameters received from configuration. What about this? Every time you set up a new PHP instance, there is missing time zone in PHP config. So you have to set it up, usually in small applications which runs just in Czech Republic. It's quite easy because you just have one time zone. So it's that simple. You just set time zone in Bootstrap globally for your application and it's done. Every time you use state function, it will use your local time zone. Behind the scenes, it calls some PHP stuff. Maybe you are asking, like, what is that configurator? There is object configurator, which we are calling methods on that. So this comes from Nette. It's called Nette Bootstrap package, and there's just a few files. And the point of this package is to make setup environment easier. You actually don't need this package if you want to use anything from Nette or anything, like when you want to build any application, you don't need this, but you will have much longer bootstrap because you will need to write all calls of setting up a environment for yourself. And it also is quite nice when you use Nette because it wires some things together. So for example, this is temp directory. It sets this parameter from in container. So basically, it sets this parameter, and then it's used later by cache directory when I try to find usages of this in configurator. I get this, and the first usage is in robot loader. That's thing which crawls your source code and will load basically all classes when you are wherever. It does not need to be PSR 4 or 0 compliant. And another use case for temp directory is when you are building container. It compiles container inside temp directory, and it's then included from there. Maybe you're asking why we do not have the temp directory inside our configuration, right? Any ideas why? Like, problem is that actually dependency of a container, which is basically the Nette configuration, is that temp directory path. So you need to know where the temp directory is before you actually set up the container. So that's why we have it in Bootstrap right now. Another thing, what Bootstrap handles is this. Do you remember this code? Like you have class, you are using something and you have to require it. Right? You don't want this.
Is that framework one?
Yeah. So you don't want this in your application because it gets pretty messy quite quickly. So how to get rid of this? First thing, use Composer autoloader, which will handle most of the stuff. And if you are lazy, you can add robot loader, and then you don't have to care about things, right? Because it actually loads everything for you wherever it is. Under the hood, the Nette configurator, this call is translated into this thing here. So it just sets up new robot loader, sets temp directory, and so on. That's easy. So at the end, we end up with this. Here is the outloading configurator. Then we enable tracing, set up time zone, set temp directory, enable robot loader. There is loading of configuration. We will get back to this later. And then we create container and return it. That's Bootstrap, right? There is one more thing. Because welcome to the real world. When you search for Bootstrap in my application, it usually looks like this. There is a lot of bootstraps. What? Why? Any ideas?
Environment.
Environment. That's answer for everything in this talk. It looks like that.
I like the answer.
And can you be more like precise? What do you mean by that?
You doesn't need console commands for web application, and for console you don't need routing. So environments like that needs different configuration, maybe for tests, also something else.
So Sergey said that I don't need commands for web application and routing for CLI. Yeah, that's true. So more environments, more bootstraps. This is basic stuff. We have some some common bootstrap, then application bootstrap, and CLI bootstrap. So answer is to split it. First bootstrap, it has common things. So time zone is the same for all, time directory is the same for all, CLI and application parameters are same for all because they are global for the application. Next thing, I use this small trick because I don't want Tracy in tests, so I don't enable Tracy right in the common bootstrap. I just create function there, and I will call this later from those more granular bootstraps. Now we move to application. There is bootstrap base, which is common for tests and then application bootstrap, which adds configuration of application, and it can check something for me. So now we are here in graph. We have common bootstrap, and then application based bootstrap includes the common bootstrap. And this is the bootstrap which application actually requires from index.php. It loads bootstrap base, enables Tracy because we want Tracy in our application, and then it creates container and returns. I will go through this again when there will be graph of dependencies. Yeah, it's included from index.php. And when we have tests, we again require bootstrap base, but we don't enable Tracy because we will have a lot of things in our logs directory. Instead, we will set up environment, tester environment setup, which will transform errors into more readable form, and they will be then shown in tester CLI interface. And I also add some extra configuration for tests. You can override services there if you want. You can use mocks there if you want. So we end up with something like this. Here is our web server, index.php, which requires application bootstrap, which requires the base of application bootstrap, and which requires common bootstrap. So we end up with this hierarchy of bootstraps, and we just include those leaves in this tree. Interesting thing is that these bootstraps do not return the container itself, but these bootstraps, which are reusable, returns the configurator. So you can mess more with the configuration in those more concrete bootstraps. So we end up with approximately 42 bootstraps. And next thing, I've been including just one configuration file in my common bootstrap. Do you think that is that a good idea to have just one? Huh?
No.
No. Okay.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Okay.
Maybe.
Why?
I'm somewhere between yes and no.
Maybe. Okay. And are there any reasons for that?
You should use environment variables.
I should use environment variables. Okay, I can do that. You said no. So why?
You can override service registration for staging, for example, like using Dynamic gateway for payments.
So I can override services there. Yeah, definitely. So yes and no. I still have one configuration file there plus the local one, but then I have a lot more configuration files which are topic oriented, which are then included from the main one. I like this approach because it makes them small, and there is always one topic inside of them, so it's like 5 lines. So for me it's more readable, but you can use it like you can have one. It's just my point of view there.
I have a note. I also use this pattern, but also use the /extensions /services. And in extensions folders, I have only neons for extensions because they are different from services neon.
So Sregi said that he has extensions directory for plugins or extensions for Nette, and he put those there, right?
Yeah, to group together same topic.
Okay.
Neon.
Yeah, so goal is the same. Cool. Another thing. Who uses config local neon on development machine, and who got out of the sync with production config local? Guys, yeah. Okay, half of people here. I have a solution for you. It's really simple. Just in config local neon, include config local example neon, and just override just those things that need to be overridden on local host. Then when you are changing or adding something, you add it to example neon with some generic value, and then config local example is up to date always. Because config local example is versioned, but config local is not. So you have the new structure of this configuration in your version control. So this makes config local example great again.
You are changing this example file, but then it will still be highlighted in your git push tool. You make some change, and you are okay with that?
I will actually push this. Like when I change something in example, it's an example, right? It's example for all the people which are included in the project. So
they will adjust the environment, so it will be no change in example.
Yeah, I use this for kind of defaults, which like works for most use cases, especially on development environment.
Usually, like setting a payment gateway to sandbox mode instead of production.
Yeah, but some guy have in example is MySQL database, and some guy has Postgres. And he changed example to the Postgres, and it will be shining in Git. Yeah, this file is changed, and he cannot push that.
No. Well, he's got his own local now, where he can override the settings from this file.
Yeah, there is another thing, because I don't use in these config local neons, I don't use configuration of services. I just change parameters section. So then it's really configuration. You can like convert it into old ini file to work the same. Okay, one more thing. Guys, who know sys? What's the correct pronunciation?
I have no idea.
PsyShell, probably.
PsyShell. Okay, PsyShell. So there's something extra here. Look at that, isn't that awesome? You just type something and you get this PHP interactive REPL. So you write, for example, 1 + 1 and you get 2. Interesting is that you can add your services there, because when you have, for example, your application, you can set up whole environment with all your bootstraps, and you can access your services. So we have a new thing here, C-shell, okay, and we need another bootstrap for that, which will set up the services for this bootstrap, for this PsyShell, and we can access them then. So this is how it looks. This is like the basic thing. You just create global variable container, and that's it. Then you make this configuration file for C-shell, which includes a bootstrap, and I just add some startup message which explains what what's available, what you can do with that, then it looks like this. So you can have container, get service, application, you can do whatever with that. If you want, I have a small demo here of what you can do with this. So I have our application here, and we can try to create new user. So what I have here available is container, account facade, so we can mess with accounts. I have identity provider, so I can log in and log out the user, and I have account read facade, so I can get some data from accounts database. So here it is. So I have these variables defined, and I can access them. Okay. For example, container. Cool is that I have autocomplete here. So first thing what I want to do is to log in. So account facade. Which will create identity for me. And when I do this, when I press tab, I will have all methods here. That's quite cool, so I will use authenticate with credentials. Password. And it says the type error that parameters should be email address, and it's been a string. So I will fix this here. Model common email address. It's quite long, I know. Magic. Ah, there is a constructor. Sorry. Off. So it creates user, the email address and password, and it actually succeeded. So I have verified account identity returned. When I put something different there, I get exception. Wrong password given for an account. So now I have identity variable, and I can log in. So I will need identity provider, login, identity. Okay, now I'm logged in as that user, and now account read facade, find verified accounts, and I get result. When I start this again, and I will try to just call this without logging in, I get an exception that it's not allowed to do find all accounts on resource with robust guest, right? So I can do pretty interesting stuff with this when you need to fiddle with things. Cool thing is that you can even use debugger for this calls here. Another thing what you can do with Bootstrap is optimizing speed. Important thing is that you usually you don't need it, so don't do that. But when you need to do that, you can do basically two things. You can split your application in and have two entry points. One index PHP for MVC application and another index .api.php with your API, and then you just put your web server ahead of your application, and it will just route this for you. For example, Nginx or Apache doesn't matter. Or if you don't want to mess with routing at web server level, you can put just condition there before things are loaded, and you can just set up something different there. This is more messy. Another thing is that you can handle legacy code there. For example, you use global DB object, so you use DB query globally, or you use environment get service. So then what you need to do is just to set these up in your Bootstrap, and then they are available again. So you can write new code with new APIs, with dependency injection container and with all this fancy stuff, and you can keep your old code running. So you don't get fired when you start migrating your application to new Nette, because this will save you a lot of time. So this is Nette environment setup and DB setup. So to sum it up, HTTP request comes, index PHP is, starts, then it requires Bootstrap, then there is whole cascade of bootstraps, it setups environment, returns container, then it starts application, and it returns the HTTP request response, and that's it. Any questions?
Yeah. Do you enable debug mode or tracing for some developer requests? Like if you have this in cookie enable tracing, do you ever use that?
I never used that.
Because you have there that commented line if remote IP address is this enable tracing, but that's not reliable. I came up with this idea: if you have this cookie set with some secret value, enable tracing, but that's not also the best thing, because if you fire somebody, he has this debugging cookie value. If you ever face this problem?
Actually, I never faced this problem. What was there in slides was copied from Nette Sandbox. But I would probably deal with this using the reverse proxy. So you can actually do like the full authentication there, and then it can pass some headers to application if you want to make this like really robust. So you can check headers there in Bootstrap and react to that.
I have a question. Isn't it better to configure like everything through environment variables? You said that someone, or Sri said that someone can choose different database or something like that, but I think it's not the case. But for example, different version of MySQL, or so the question is, if you make your application, for example, as an image, and you want to run that image on testing environment and the same image on the production environment, so you can only change the environment variables, and on the testing environment, you actually will test that exact image, but with different database, and after a successful test, those that image will be used in production. So, the question is it a bit simpler to configure everything through environment variables?
So the question is if I should use environment variables for all configurations instead of these configs, which is especially useful in Docker environment. right?
For example.
Okay, so yeah, you can do that if it's useful for you. I don't use Docker environment for this, so it's not useful for me. But you can combine this, right? You can have config local neon, which will have all this get env, and you can read whatever from environment variables you want, right? So you can use this for local development if you don't want to use Docker and you want to keep things simple. And if you want to use then environments as just one file, definitely you can do that. Depends on the use case. Okay, guys, thank you for your attention.